Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Storytime. I am your host and producer, Courtney Baker. Thank you so much for joining us today. Today's episode is so special and so amazing. It is with one of my friends, Demian Arriaga. He is one of the most talented people I know, but also one of the kindest people I know. You may have seen him if you were a fan for a Jonas Brothers show, either back in the day or this most recent tour. He just is so incredible, and I'm really excited to introduce him to all of you. It's a longer episode, so buckle up, get comfortable, but there are so many really important topics that we talk about that I highly suggest you listen to the entire thing. Don't leave us too early because you won't want to miss a second of it. So enjoy the episode. All right, y'all, we are back, and I am here with a guest that I have been trying to get on the show for weeks. Demian, thank you so much for joining me. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic. Thank you for having me, and I'm sorry it's been hard to get a hold of me, but here we are.
Hey, it's going to be a great one. Like, it's worth the wait.
I hope so.
All right. Well, first thing I want to ask you about, because when we were talking about planning a time to record, you had mentioned that your house had burned down. So, but you wouldn't tell me the story. So I'm very interested. What happened? Like, how?
Yeah. So to make a long story short, and first of all, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate the words. I am moved by your interest and always, your interaction and always wanting to show support for me supporting certain causes and things. So I value that and I appreciate it. So last year I was on tour with the Jonas Brothers, and we were in Vancouver. I had just hung out with an old dear friend of mine that I hadn't seen in a few years, and I saw him. He's a few years younger than me. He's my friend's younger brother, and I had seen him just in his city and grow up and be like, starting his life as this adult. And he's telling me about all these things and trials and tribulations and what it was like to be an immigrant. And then there, and I was just so happy. We had dinner, and everything was great. I was in the best mood ever. I got to my hotel room, and I started watching Netflix with my wife. And next thing you know, she's like, "Hey, babe, hold on a second. I got an alert about some fires nearby." And I was like, "Oh, okay, cool. Where we live in LA, this happens somewhat often." Mm-hmm. So it's just like, it's going to be fine. She's just going to have to figure out where it is, and that'll be fine. And mind you, this was the night before we recorded one of the documentary shows for the documentary, for the live show, for the Happiness Continues thing. And she tells me, "Hey, honey, I got to go. The backyard is on fire. The fire is here in our home, in our little community." And it had started about a mile away. So she called me and she asked me, she's like, I'm evacuating. I have to leave. What do you want me to save from the house? Like, imagine that call, right? So my thought process was like, I want her to leave. I don't care about anything. Leave, be healthy, be safe. And I just so happened to know there were a couple of things that I would like, and I had thought about in sort of like in case of an emergency, which were 3 soccer jerseys that I collect, and a handpan, which is this weird instrument that I play that I have this emotional attachment to it. Aside from that, I didn't care about anything. I just wanted her to be safe, and she had enough time to do that. So she grabbed a few things and left the house, and when she came back a few days later, she came into the house, and there was a corner of our home that had gotten burned, and it basically contaminated the entire place. So the house didn't get burned per se, but there was so much soot and fire damage to all the walls that it basically had to be stripped down to the studs. And so we've been out of our home since, she's been out of the home since October. Over a year, she hasn't been in our home. And so I got back after tour in February, and we've been dealing with this since March. You know, there's issues with insurance companies and all these other things. So we're still out of our home. What you see here is us staying at an Airbnb, trying to survive and during COVID times and all this other stuff. So it's been a to a degree a nightmare, and at the same time it has been an exercise in positivity and optimism and staying afloat and knowing that there are other people that are doing much worse, that we have some sort of a champagne problem, so to speak. But you know, it's getting to the point where if something doesn't get resolved soon, it's going to be, you know, very difficult to continue. So, but you have to do it. There's no choice. So that's sort of why it's been hard to get a hold of me, because I teach a lot during the day, and then the days when we could sort of match up, they're up in the air because I might have to go to the house with my wife and see if the contractor is there, have a talk or something. So that's why it's been hard to do anything really. So that's what my life has been consumed by, you know. So.
Oh my gosh. Well, like
Yeah.
you mentioned, COVID in the music industry. I mean, as if trying to redo your entire house wasn't hard enough. COVID, I mean, me in sports, you in music, they were the two industries that took the hardest
Yeah.
hit. I know I told you about my uncle. He was on tour with Dream Theater until
Yeah.
COVID, and then that all blew up. My aunt she was doing vocal lessons in person in LA, and then COVID, now she can't.
Oof.
So they've both been just kind of out of work waiting all year. So for you, I know it's been just as tough because you're so used to being on the road. So how have you really adapted to the kind of stay-at-home order and just being forced to do a 180?
Well, that's a great question, and I'm sure we'll have a Dream Theater talk later on, because you can talk to me about Dream Theater and just like throw that out there and like not be. You know, it's going to sound a little arrogant, but I'm a person that adapts, and I also understand that it's not about how I feel, is about the greater good, and try to exercise empathy. So when it was sort of proven that staying at home and doing our part was what was best for the entire country and the world, then that is like a switch that flicks on, and that is my goal. So I just kind of take care of me, and I'm like, well, this is what the situation is now. And in the past, it's not like I've been touring consistently for 10 years. You know, I mean, through those 10 years or more that I've been in LA, I have toured basically every single year. But it's not like I did with the Brothers, where it was from April of last year till, you know, half of the year, over 100 shows or something like that. That doesn't happen that often. So what I usually do in between is teaching. And that has always kept me not only sane, but it gives me sustenance emotionally, personally, musically, relationally. And that's what I've always tried to do. When COVID hit, I was like, okay, great. I'll just teach. But nobody was taking, like with your aunt. There were no in-person lessons. It was all via Zoom. So it was like, how do I adapt? How do I do drums? And where do I live? So I didn't even know where I was going to live. So how am I going to have a drum set? You know, I couldn't afford my studio spot in the studio, in my lockout room. Internet wasn't all that good, so I couldn't do lessons there. I didn't feel comfortable, because then you're playing, you hear everything around you, and then you have your buddies coming in, knocking on your door, wanting to, you know, talk about drumming or whatever. So that's what I kind of had to adapt very quickly, and trying to not like, oh my God, why do I have to do this? Why is it why is my life like? I try to not think about that. Of course, it came through my mind, but I try to always keep in mind that it was momentary, that there were other things that I am about as a human being and as a person, that it could be the perfect quote unquote time to explore. And that's what I did. So instead of practicing drums, and before I would practice, when I'm not on tour, I would practice drums maybe 5 or 6 hours a day, for example. And what I would do now, since I couldn't play drums all that time, is that I started playing bass, which I love. I mean, I've played bass for a while, but I started super, you know, meticulously taking lessons, doing online courses, practicing every single day. And my bass playing has grown exponentially from, you know, a level 1, let's just call it, at the beginning of COVID till now, I'm at like a 7 or something like that in comparison to where I was. Not in
Right.
the gram, spectrum of bass playing, but so I've grown exponentially, and I would have never ever done that, Court, if I didn't not have COVID. Like without COVID, I wouldn't have done it. I would have just played drums.
Uh-huh.
I started twitching, for example, which was a whole different sort of game changer for me because I learned about that. I've always wanted to do more interactive stuff because I've done my podcast, but it was just like me talking and people here, and then maybe eventually they'll make a comment about it. Now it's like on the spot. People say something, they ask me questions, or I'm drumming, and they request songs, or I'm playing congas and they do this or that. So, and I've always wanted like a radio show. So it gives me an opportunity to practice being more eloquent, practice transitions, and if there's nothing to talk about, there's kind of like dead air, what to talk about and improvise and speak and all these other things. So I've realized that there's more to what I need to do as a human being that it just working on my craft and music and my livelihood only. And I was able to try to teach more, and which I still do, and I'm always looking for more students, and try to realize that it was like almost as if it was like an off touring period, like I've had before. So how did I survive then? How am I going to survive now? Usually through teaching, and that's what I've been able to do. And of course, unemployment and all these other things have helped. I've been very fortunate because the tour that I did with the most amazing bosses that are incredibly generous and people that are super solid human beings and empathetic, and they take care of their people. So it was a privilege working with them, and they were always they're very protective of their crew for as long as they can. So I'm always appreciative too of that.
Love that. And what is some advice that you tell your students where maybe somebody's listening that hasn't done a class with you before, but does play and is trying to stay motivated during COVID and being forced to stay at home? What advice would you give them, to keep going, to keep trying, and to keep learning?
I guess the suggestion would be the sort of contingent to the age of whoever's listening, right? Because if it's somebody older who depends on this for a living, it might be slightly different than what I would tell with a very young person that's just getting started. But I think the overall sort of umbrella suggestion thing would be to realize that this is not the normal world, right? COVID times are a snapshot of what our lives normally are. So and it's almost the same recommendation as without COVID, but just be happy. Whatever your relationship with music is, be happy. Play songs that you love. Play songs that inspire you, that get you excited, that motivate you. Take lessons with as many people as possible. Try to learn every method or many methods from different people and find the one that you connect with and one that you love. But more than anything, now more in a sort of more music teacher perspective, what I would say is to not think about your education and your career as a ladder necessarily, like this happens and then this and this and that. More think of it more as a puzzle piece or a jigsaw puzzle that you're seeing from up above, and you have certain pieces, and maybe you start over here and then you start over there, and maybe you found a piece that's from the bottom left corner. So everything is a part of one thing, one image, and it's up to us to decide what that image is, depending on our goals and dreams and all this other stuff. But just kind of take it easy, exercise forgiveness, know that everything is not normal, and to play for the reasons that you've always wanted to play, which is to have fun and imagine you're playing with rock stars and all that other stuff, and just do it. Have fun.
That's awesome. I love that advice. So I want to kind of start from, I always love on this show hearing what made the guests start doing whatever their career is, what the main message is that we're talking about. So for you, you grew up in Venezuela. So what made you really fall in love with music? Because I know then you went to Berkeley, and that's when you moved to Boston. But, what kind of got your passion going for that?
So, like you said, I grew up in Venezuela in a very much a very open-minded household. My dad is a chemical engineer. My mom's a psychologist. And they're completely enamored with music and by music, so they love the beat. I grew up listening to the Beatles, Queen, and a lot of salsa music, Ruben Blades, and a million Venezuelan bands, and all that other stuff. And I was also very much into sports, and I had those two obsessions: sports, specifically soccer, and music. And the older I got, the exponentially better I got in more into music than into sports. Maybe because physically I wasn't really built as like Cristiano Ronaldo, and I was just like this little tiny shorter kid that wasn't really that tall, skinny. I didn't have that fight, to leave it all on the field, and that I just wanted to play, and I had somewhat of vision and technique, but I didn't really have that extra drive and motivation. And I was dedicating more time to music. My fantasies and my dreams and goals were all about being on stage with musicians, watching movies like Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure and Bogus Journey and all those things. As like this kid in Venezuela, like idolizing what American life was about. I started falling in love with that, watching a lot of MTV, and then I just straight up got into Metallica, Megadeth, and all these bands, and I became obsessed with that. And to a degree, to make it a little more romantic, and it's a story I tell often, my favorite band growing up, as much as I listened to all these metal bands, was this band called Extreme from Boston that had a song called More Than Words. It's this ballad that a lot of people know, and they should know if they don't. And I was about fifth or sixth grade, the last day of school, and I heard some people making music, and I saw this little crowd after school, and then I went over there, and there were some upperclassmen playing guitar and singing, and they were singing and playing More Than Words, and I was like, wow, like, I love that song, and this is the first time that I hear anybody play a song that I know. Up until that point, it was just like covers or like, well, this was a cover too, but like traditional Venezuelan songs or like, I don't know. I don't even know, like a Queen song or Beatles or something like that. But this was like my song, like something that was mine that like nobody knew that I loved. And that moment, that was like the it moment where I was like, well, whatever I'm feeling now, this is what I want for the rest of my life. And even though I developed that as a little bit of a passion, I wasn't ever really like, this is what I'm doing forever. It was just like, this is what I like a lot. It wasn't, it was a passion in the sense of me being very, obsessed with it, but I never had a vision or this determination of like, this is what I want to do. Even through college, like I was like, I guess this is what I like to do the most. We'll see what happens. I've never really been this like super future planning person. It's always been like at the moment. So that's kind of the moment but if I had to pinpoint one moment, that was it. When I heard this guy, Fernando Brandt, play that song, I was like, dude, this is what I want to do for a living.
That's amazing. And was it scary making the move to Boston? Like, what was the biggest culture shock for you, if any, when you made the move?
It was very easy, as a matter of fact, because my dad went to MIT in Boston. My grandfather went to BU, also in Boston. So my sister went to Suffolk University in Boston. So Boston was always a thing for our family. And when my sister started college, she's 4 years older than me, we all moved to Boston, to Brookline, Massachusetts. So that was in 95. So I was like 13. So from 13 to 15, I lived in Boston, and I went to high school there, met a bunch of people, made a lot of friends, and became accustomed to the city, to the train system. I lived like 15 minutes away from Fenway Park. I would go to the park all the time. I would skateboard down Newbury Street. It was like a thing. So when I went back to Venezuela, I finished high school and I had to go to college. I didn't know what to do. Eventually, I decided to go to college in Venezuela, and that was a mess. It was a farce. It was horrible. And then I decided to apply to Berkeley, and then I eventually moved. So when I moved, while everybody was like, oh, my God, this city, we moved from a different country, blah, 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 I already spoke English. I already knew the city inside out. I knew where to live. I knew where to eat, where not to eat. I knew the train system. I knew all the holidays. I knew when it would snow. I knew when it would rain. I knew what to wear, what not to. So I was very spoiled. It was very easy, so I could concentrate on living on my own and understanding what that was. And that was the coolest part for me. And it's what I think it's the best thing about college is that more than the education itself, because obviously it's important. But that knowing yourself, understanding accountability, responsibility, all that other stuff, I think that was what the most exciting part for me was, like finally living alone,
Mhm.
So yeah, it wasn't that difficult.
Dang. Well, there you go. I went to Boston. It was December, gosh, just maybe December like 2016, 2017. And you know me, I'm from Arizona. Used to in December, it's like 70 degrees, wearing t-shirts,
Yeah,
shorts, very similar to LA weather. I get to Boston and it's like 13 degrees. And I'm
yeah,
like, what is going on? But the city is so beautiful and so
yeah,
historic. I just bundled up and walked around for hours. Like my
yeah,
lips were frozen. I could not talk, could not text. But I did a Fenway tour, and I mean, I wish it was baseball season because
yeah.
the
Oh, I bet.
ballpark's just unreal. I'm so jealous that
It's
you were there.
unbelievable. Fenway is unbelievable. Yeah, and something weird happens. I was talking to my wife about that the other day. That like, it's almost like it's you really feel like the cold, and you hate the cold if it's where you're from, where what you're used to. But if you
Mm-hmm.
go somewhere else, it's like, well, I guess this is what it is here, and then you don't think about it.
Mm-hmm.
And it happens in Boston. It's like that. Or it's even like the heat. Like I hate it when it's super hot here. But when I
Mm-hmm.
go to Arizona and I go to see my friend and we go to like Top Golf and it's like disgusting out, you're like, well, it's Arizona, and then you just play. You don't even complain. But if that was
Yeah.
that hot and humid in LA or whatever, you'd be like, I hate this place or whatever. So,
Yeah.
I feel you.
The good thing about
Boston's great.
Arizona, like it's hot. It can get up to, I think it's been up to 120 when I lived
Oof.
there. But like it's a dry heat. So it
Yeah,
feels like you're standing in an oven, but at least you aren't like
yeah.
sticky.
And I did say humidity, but I meant like or humidity
Yeah.
in other places as well, like Houston, for example. Actually, Houston is
Oh,
terrible, but yeah.
Houston's airport, I had a layover there
Oh,
going, I don't even remember where. I think I was going to Memphis, so another super humid place. And I
yeah,
was like, I'm
very
sitting at
humid.
my gate, and why am I all gross? Like,
Yeah. It's terrible. Miami's like that too. It's like, oh my god, oh my god.
yeah, I'll stay in the dry states. But all right, so you went to Berkeley, but then what was the first gig out of college where you're like, okay, this is life changing? Like, this is it for me.
Okay, so while at Berkeley, my mind had gone and my body had gone through these changes of what I wanted to do musically.
Mhm.
And at the same time, I knew what I really wanted. So, in other words, I wanted to do rock and play with my idols and all these people that I fantasized playing with. But at Berkeley, I learned a lot about Afro Cuban music, and I switched from drums to percussion because I was so scared by the competition and intimidated by it that I was like, there's just no way I can compete with all these people. I'm going to learn something different and new and something that I know that could potentially help me out in the future. So I did percussion. So I changed completely what I was doing, not what I was listening to. I was still listening to Dream Theater and all these things. And I took lessons my very last semester with this drummer named Mike Mangini, who played in Extreme and also currently plays and works with your uncle, plays in Dream Theater. And I had a few conversations with him, and then when I started taking lessons with him, I sort of fell in love with music, with the rock and metal music that I had wanted to, because that's what I was kind of working on with him. And up until that point, I was just like this Venezuelan percussionist that I was doing like stuff with. I was working with people like who is now Saint Vincent. We are doing like kind of singer songwriter stuff, and I was like that dude playing with like singer songwriters and stuff, playing like minimal percussion. But I really wanted to do something else.
Mhm.
So after those conversations, I was like, this is what I need, like a rock gig. This is what I want to do. But I was in a situation where I needed my visa and I needed all these other things. So I had already done percussion and Latin music, and I was like, this is what I just need to keep doing. I'll leave the rock stuff to a side. And I auditioned for this band in shortly after I graduated, and I failed. It was horrible. It was miserable. It was the
Oh.
worst. I was like, there goes my visa, because were supposed to tour, and I needed letters of recommendation, and it was like a super large band, so I knew like I could get at least like 10 letters of recommendation and all this other stuff.
Mhm.
I thought I could do it, but I didn't practice enough. I wasn't prepared enough. I was just like, oh my god, I just graduated from Berkeley. I'm like $100, $100,000 in debt for student loans, and this is what I do. Oh my god, it's terrible. So I was super bummed, and I called a teacher of mine, and I asked him, if he knew of any gigs or anything like that. And he said, look, come to this show that I have and be my tech, like set my stuff up because I can't really do it, and I'll introduce you to some people. So I was like, yeah, sure, whatever. So I went, I set him up, and he introduced me to this guy who in turn asked me, he liked my vibe and what I was all about, and he asked me to come to the studio the following week. So I show up to the studio the following week with all my instruments or whatever, just to rehearse. I had no idea what I was going to do. I was just like, I guess I'm working or whatever. And he asked me to set up in a room. So I set up, and then the door opens up, and I hear somebody ask me where he was. His name is Leo. So he asked me, he's like, hey, man, do you know where Leo is? And when I turn around and I see his face, I couldn't believe it. And it was Gary Sharon, a.k.a. the singer of Extreme, the singer of More Than Words, the song that I told you about that got me into music. So I was like, oh, my God, I'm in the same room as this person. What the hell is going on? And then he looks at my instruments and he's like, oh, you're the percussionist we're working with today. That's awesome. My name is Gary. And I was like, oh, my God, I'm Demian. And he sits down and we start talking. And then Leo walks in with his guitar and he's like, all right, guys, we don't have a lot of time, so let's just get to it. Demian, do you know More Than Words? Oh, by the way, this is Gary. You know, we have this acoustic show. We need a percussionist, and we thought it would be cool to add someone. And we like your vibe. You come highly recommended. So that was like my first professional rehearsal. My first gig was playing More Than Words with like one of my idols, somebody that I admire and respect. And I ended up doing a few more shows with him. And that was like sort of my introduction to the world of music. So that's why I'm so passionate about dreams coming true and everything being a possibility. It's because I've lived it and I've seen it. And it's not just like this wishful thinking stuff. I know I'm very lucky and privileged that it was my first one. Maybe if it wasn't my first one, I wouldn't have developed the love that I have for possibilities, let's just say. But it is what it is, and it was what it was. So I honed in on that feeling of like, oh my God, playing with my idol, that is what it's all about. I love that much more than playing an impressive drum solo or conga solo for a salsa band. That was beautiful in its own thing, but this was like, gave me another sort of, food, soul food, in a way. So that's what I decided to do and focus on. And then that's why I decided to move to LA. It's because I wanted more of that. And there weren't any of these people in Boston. Like even the Aerosmith guys weren't living in Boston. And there's no way I was going to play in Aerosmith. So what can I do to play with other people that I admire and love and respect and big names and stuff like that? Well, they're in LA. And I even asked him directly. I was like, to Gary, I was like, hey, dude, I kind of want to grow in my career and expand. What should I do? And he said, move to LA. That was in late November. By January 29th of 2007, I had booked a one-way ticket to LA. And I've been here ever since. I hadn't even ever been here. So.
Oh my gosh. And I know for me in the sports industry, I try to turn off being starstruck by anyone. I think the only people were when I was working for the Suns, Kobe Bryant walked past me and Kevin Durant. Like those two were the ones where I was like starstruck, but anyone else I can turn it off. Like I'm used to it. But for you, were you like starstruck to the point where you were like, I don't know if I can play right now. Like I was like prepared to play with my idol, or how did you like get in the zone and be able to focus?
That's a great question. I get starstruck all the time. That is such a beautiful feeling, and I just love it. It makes me just feel like a kid, and it's amazing. And also, not everybody where I'm from, and I didn't come from the slums, but not everybody that it comes from has gotten the opportunity to be around these people and meet these people. And that's what a lot of my friends wanted, to play with these guys and know these guys, and I have their phone numbers and stuff like it. It's just bizarre. So the sort of real answer to that is that the preparation has to come before. That's what you go to school for. You study, you practice countless hours, and you try to envision yourself in many different situations, and to exercise professionalism and be prepared and know technique enough so you can check out and concentrate on other things. And know, and so you practice concentration when you're younger or when you're starting out. It's not like just concentrate to get better. You concentrate to practice concentration because there might be other things that might be happening. And this was some things that I learned, ironically, from Mike Mangini: visualization, attention to detail, being in the moment, looking at what you're doing, being present, trying to not let anything distract you and serve a purpose. So when a person like Sharon walks in and we're playing my favorite song and I have to be there, I have enough confidence in, at that moment I play bongos, for example. If I have enough confidence on my bongo playing to play one pattern and just listen to the song, I know the song inside out. I had envisioned playing that song with him a million times, and I, as an exercise before, many years before, I had practiced playing percussion along to songs that didn't have percussion. That was something that I would do religiously. A million songs. That song, "To Be With You" by Mr. Big, and any sort of like hair metal ballad that you can imagine that didn't have percussion, I would always like play percussion to it. And it was just like that. I was there. You're there for a moment. You have to sort of psych yourself out. And I don't know how I did it, to be honest with you, because it was my first time doing it. It's not like I had an experience prior doing that. But at the moment, it's just like a survival skill. You know, you're like, you have to do it. I knew this was it, and you've been taught. You know, you have one chance, and you know, perfect timing, right place at the right time. So I was like, dude, this is it. It's clear. So I'm gonna play the song, and I didn't solo. I didn't do crazy stuff. I was just like, what do I need? And there's no Instagram. There was no TikTok. It was just 3 dudes in a room with a guitar, 1 singer, 1 guitar player, 1 dude playing percussion, and that was it. So but I get starstruck. I still get starstruck. On this last tour I did, I was starstruck every night, or almost every night.
So let's
some
talk
more
about,
than others, yeah.
Yeah, let's talk about that tour that you were on. I flew home for the December Phoenix Jonas Brothers show because I missed the May one. We were in season, but I saw so many videos and pictures, and I was like, oh my God, I have to go to this December one. And it was funny because I looked down from my seats and rocking out to the show, I see guys like Archie Bradley, Cole Tucker, Cody Bellinger. Yeah. I'm like, these are guys that I've like worked in the same industry, and they're jamming as hard as Jonas Brothers as I am right now. So like those guests I know were on, like, I mean, that level of guests went to every show. So was there a guest that was in the audience for any show on the tour where you're like, oh my God, this is so cool, this person is watching this show right now?
Yes, there were, I mean, all of them. Cole Tucker is amazing. I love Cole. Cody, I mean, I'm not friends with Cody. He probably doesn't know who I am. I met him. We talked for a little bit. It was amazing talking to Pat Mahomes and Drew Brees pre some comments that he made. I'm a massive Patriots fan, so I see these guys and I'm like, oh, I see what you're trying to do. That's cool. Actually, I told Pat, I saw Pat, and I'm like, dude, I mean, as a Patriots fan, not that this means anything, but you're a monster. You're going to be like Brady. You're going to be in the Hall of Fame. You're going to win a Super Bowl. And he's like, dude, stop. Don't say that. I'm not anywhere near as good. The most humble guy. It was amazing. And Cole is great. I speak to Cole often. He's a great dude. But in all my fandom, in admiration for people, and we've seen musicians. You talk about being starstruck. We played with the Boys before in 2010, and like Paul Simon was in the crowd, and you know, I know like Keith Urban came to shows and all these other stuff. So it's cool. But the moment that has meant the absolute most for me, as far as starstruck, not family members or my wife, because that's untouchable. Just to throw that disclaimer out. I was in London, and I invited a few of the Arsenal women players who are my idols, and my like biggest inspiration in life are players for Arsenal and specifically players for the Dutch national team. And I was able to invite my favorite soccer player, that is my favorite male or female. Her name is Daniela van de Donk, and Beth Mead, who's a England forward, and Louise Quinn, who is a defender for Ireland. And they're all star players for Arsenal. And they came to the show in London, and we had dinner before. And we hung out and I was playing in front of them. That is the most surreal experience of my life, and it's a moment that I will never ever forget. And it's impossible to pick my favorite show I've ever done. But as far as favorite moment on stage, to see somebody other than my wife and family or my parents, my sister and her kids or close friends, that is number one. I mean, on this, I can't describe it. I get chills thinking about it. And they're wonderful people. So to me, it's amazing, and it's already changed the way that now I see sports. Like now, when I watch them play, and if they lose, I don't care that my team lost. I'm like, I wonder how they're feeling. Are they okay? Like, you know, that, like, or like when you work with a million athletes, and it's like if I see Cole, right, and I check, and I'm like, oh, the Pirates lost, and I'm like, shit, man, like, I wonder how he's feeling. Dude, I'm bummed, man. I'm sorry. Like, or, I'm sorry. Why aren't you starting? Like, you know, like things like that. I
Right?
remember like opening day, I saw, and I'm like, Cole's not in the lineup, and I'm like, what the hell is going on? I hope they lose today. Like that kind of
I'm the
weird thing.
same way though. Like my brothers always give me such a hard time. They did it twice this week already. So that's why it's funny that you bring it up, because I will always root for the athletes that I've worked with over the teams. So like guys I've worked with, obviously Diamondbacks, Dodgers, Rockies are all in the same division. So my
Right.
brothers are like, oh, Courtney cheering for her million teams. And it's like,
Right.
no, you root for the people. And it's like you don't get upset so much as like, oh, I'm a fan and this team lost. It's, oh, I actually feel for the athletes. But have you ever made it out to an Arsenal match or not yet?
I haven't. And to your previous point, by the way, I think that when you're in it in something so deeply, like you understanding sports and that dynamic, and me understanding music, they're
Mhm.
very similar. This is a very specific group. And by the way, I'm talking about, in this case, the brothers, not
Mhm.
normal, quote unquote, normal musicians. The level of dedication, investment of time, energy, love, and your passion that is required to get to such a high level,
Mhm.
and us backing musicians as well, you understand certain things, and it's like you understand that you could play in with a Jonas Brothers, or you could play with a, another band, a Dream Theater, and
Mhm.
there's a very similar amount of work and all this other stuff. Same with sports, and you understand. We start understanding these things that transcend teams, and I'm all about team loyalty, like a
Mhm.
sports loyalty. Like I will always support the Patriots. I will always support the Arsenal through
Mhm.
thick and thin or whatever. With Brady, with no Brady, will always look. I have freaking my Patriots hat. I
Yes.
have every jersey you can imagine. But there's something else. So like if one of my favorite players, one of the girls that I mentioned, they go play for the rival team, I
Mhm.
know her. I met her, so I
Mhm.
want her to succeed. If she's a friend of mine,
Yeah.
I want her to succeed. I don't care. Like it's not like I want them to suffer. And at some point, if you know these people personally, you're like, that's all you care about,
Mhm.
honestly. So not, I'm not saying like, oh, people don't understand. Well, like if you haven't been in that position, you can't understand, or you don't try to
Mhm.
understand. Um, if you haven't been in that position and you don't even try to understand, then you won't understand. But if you try, you will. And to your answer, no, I haven't been, precisely because of this sports loyalty thing that I have. I haven't been happy with how the Arsenal squad, the men team, have been playing.
Mhm.
And I've had, sort of vendettas in terms of how much they charge and X, Y, or Z, players they don't buy, how they treat players, and how players treat the team, and the kind of signings we make. So my way of voicing my opinion is through boycotting stuff or not buying things. So I do
Mhm.
not go to their games whenever they come to LA. I don't particularly care. I would have loved to meet them, and I
Mhm.
tried meeting some of them at a couple of restaurants one time, but I it's fine. But now the women's squad, I'm completely obsessed with, and
Mhm.
they're playing tomorrow and it's the first time they're having guests, or sorry, fans in the
Mhm.
audience all season long and end of
Oh.
last season. So that is my biggest sort of like sporting dream, would be that to go to an Arsenal match and moreover, even more actually, to go see the Dutch women's team play because I'm obsessed with Dutch soccer. My whole life, my great grandfather was Dutch, and my grandmother always like would make me watch the Dutch national team play, and so that's like my dream is to watch those two teams play.
Oh, that's so cool. Well, maybe
Yeah,
it'll happen someday. I'm sure it will.
I'm make it happen. I promise you, I'm gonna make it happen. It's just no way. I'm getting my wife in a couple of like next year or something. We're gonna fly to London, and then there's the Euro Cup next year. The girls play, so I might be able to watch either one. But if I had to pick, it'll probably be the be Arsenal because I know more of the players. So
Nice.
yeah,
All right. So I know I'm taking up way more of your time than I
I
told you I
have
would.
plenty of time. So go ahead.
Perfect. All
Yes,
right.
please.
So let's chat now. I will start off by admitting I did not listen to the soundtrack yet because my mind has been in a million places this week. But I sat through the 3-hour show. So I feel like I am a true Dream Theater listener. So, all right. You had your connection in your beginning music days, me with my uncle. So for everybody that doesn't listen to Dream Theater, because I honestly had no idea who they were, admittedly, until my uncle started working with them, explain the type of band to everyone that Dream Theater is.
Oh my goodness, this is such an amazing question. I've never gotten asked this. I'm so excited. So, Dream Theater is a American prog metal band. So that means a progressive metal band. And a way to describe that is that basically they play weird math, odd sounding music, very intricate, very technically driven as a category. But Dream Theater has a lot of musicality and feel and melody, and it's basically not what their title says it is. They transcend that style of music. They're also comprised historically and currently with among the greatest musicians to play their current instrument. So Mike Mangini currently is among the greatest drummers that ever lived. John Petrucci, the guitar player, one of the greatest guitar players that ever lived. John Mayang, one of the greatest rock bass players that ever lived. Jordan Root is one of the greatest keyboard players, rock keyboard players that ever lived. James LaBrie, one of the greatest vocalists in rock history. So when these bands unite with like super amazing people, they can make outstanding music. I love the very beginning of Dream Theater with another drummer, actually, Mike Portnoy, and who started the band. And in your progress as a musician, people my age or my generation, I should say, there were all these bands that, to a degree, you could play their music. Like you learn, and you're like at this level, and you can play all these bands. And then you're at this level, you play Metallica songs. You're at this level, then you play Megadeth songs. You this level, and then at some point, there's this gap where you hear Dream Theater, and it's what it was for the earlier generation with like bands like Rush, for example. And you're like, whoa, what is this? What is this drummer doing? Oh my God. And then it's another level, and then they started making amazing albums. So it was the reason why I loved it so much. It was because bands like Pink Floyd and Yes and Deep Purple and Emerson, Lake and Palmer and all these bands that were sort of from the 60s and 70s that were prog and stuff like that, I never really at that time enjoyed the way their drums were sounding or the guitars were sounding because I was listening to metal. And then you hear Dream Theater and are playing similar things with newer sounds, and you're like, mind blown. And that's what I wanted to do. And I became obsessed with them. And I've seen them, I don't know, 17 times or something like that. And every side project that they've had, I listen to their music very, very often. And it's just, lyrically they're interesting, or there's some songs that are very interesting that resonate with me. Some guitar solos are like my favorite ever. The drums are beautifully sounding and beautifully composed and all these things. And I also understand why people wouldn't like Dream Theater. I totally understand why people would be like, dude, this is boring or no feel or whatever. And I'm be like, no, you're wrong. You should listen to this song. And they're very particular also depending on what tour you go see them. Like you probably saw them at, I think, the Astonishing or something like that. Or no, you saw them last year, right?
Yeah, I think it was right before the Jonas Brothers show. So like
Okay.
late November, maybe. I
Yeah,
can't.
so they could have played like an entire album, you
They
know, that
did
they
two
two
albums.
albums, right?
Like it was crazy. I think that's why it
Yeah.
was a 3 hour long show.
Yeah, or it could have been one album that's 3 hours. So there's history as far as like, you know, how they've developed songs, like part
Mhm.
one into part two. They had a song called Metropolis Part One, and it was like this super intricate 8-minute song. And then what did they do for a part two? They did an entire album that lasted over 90 minutes or something like that. And it's called Metropolis Part Two, and it's a whole album. So it's like they take snippets of the first song and they
Mhm.
they play them throughout this 90-minute piece, and it's like a story, and it's like a rock metal opera, and you hear their characters and stuff like that. So I find that fascinating. I actually went to the show they did in August of 2000, the day where they recorded that DVD. So it's a band that means a lot to me, and I love it, and I would suggest anybody that at least wants to progress musically to
Mhm.
check them out from a technical level and from a compositional level, because they're very, very impressive, and you should learn them because the same way that you should learn Bruce Springsteen songs, you should learn Dream Theater songs.
And Dream Theater, while it's not my normal show that I would go to, I don't think I would have gone if my uncle hadn't been mixing it. It was so cool just because you appreciate their talent and their skills. So it's like, no, this isn't what I'm listening to when I'm working out or when I'm just chilling, but it's just their fans were so like overtaken with emotion when the
Yeah,
songs are played. And that's
yeah,
such a special thing about
it is,
music that not
and
every
it's
artist can do. Like not every artist can have that impact on people.
no, and that is exactly why I feel so great about being a Dream Theater fan. It's like it's like Comic Con, or it's like something where like people are outcasts
Mhm.
and they don't belong anywhere else. But Dream Theater fans have this brotherhood, or this brethren, or this relationship that it's like, and sisterhood, obviously, like this is ours. Like you don't,
Mhm.
if you don't get it, that's fine. Don't get it. It's don't stay out. That's fine. The least, the better, that kind of thing. And we're moved, and we can have discussions about albums. No, I like Awake. No, I like Images and Words more. Well, Metropolis. Well, actually, 6 Degrees of Inner Turbulence. Like you can do this forever, and I love that. And you said something that is the key, which is their music means so much,
Mhm.
and that is exactly what it is with the Jonas Brothers. It's the identical thing. I've been at shows, at Dream Theater shows. I've been on stage, and I've also been to Jonas Brothers shows. I get it. It's the same thing. It's the
Mhm.
same religious experience of that is my song, or this is my show. I'm here
Mhm.
with my people. I get it. And I don't get that with sports. Like when I go to Fenway Park, I'm like, oh my God, these douchebags, right? Like, oh my God, these guys are getting into a fight over a fucking Derek Jeter. Are you kidding me?
Yeah,
Like, no, I
they're
don't relate
intense.
myself. I don't have that with sports. Like I wouldn't go into a fight because somebody, or an argument online because somebody insulted a soccer player or something. No, it's just stupid. It's
Yeah.
stupid. But with music, I'm like, wait a minute. What did you just say about Mike Mangini? Like, it's a different thing. But meaning something to so many people, that's why it's so beautiful. That's why I do music, because a song like More Than Words meant a lot to me, and I was able to play it.
Mhm.
And when I'm on stage with the brothers and they play a song like Gotta Find You, where everybody just like belts out the song and
Mhm.
everybody's moving or singing or like humming along, it's priceless. And I'm very privileged, and I that's when I feel like I am in Dream Theater, because I'm there and I see how the music that the guys wrote and I happen to be on stage sharing with, I can sort of soak in a little bit of that experience that otherwise I didn't, because I don't compose my own music in a band, like transcending band like Dream Theater, for example.
Yeah, the latest Jonas Brothers tour was so special for me because I'm 27. I listened to the Jonas Brothers. They did a show in Tucson. I think I was in like, I think middle school, but my grandparents stood in line at 5 a.m. to
Wow.
get me tickets, front row seats. It was a small theater too, like before they got really big. And it was just like having that as my beginning memory, and then seeing them basically every other time they came to Phoenix, up until I got to college, and then finally seeing them again all these years later. It was so cool. Such a special feeling because you feel like you grew up with them.
Yeah, you did. You absolutely did. And they know it and they value it and they cherish it and they're very appreciative of it. And that is very, very beautiful to see, you know, and you know, the rock guys, I was in the rock scene to a degree. And they were like, you know, still people are like, oh, dude, those guys like Disney stars. And it's like, no, Disney stars, sure. But they're not, it wasn't like, dude, they were like 7 people living in like a studio apartment or whatever it was. Like, they've been through it. Garbo drove their van. Like, they've done the whole thing. They're more rock, more punk in that sense than any of the bands that like mommy and daddy pay for their like super nice Gibson guitars and then they're out there touring. Like, sorry, you're not more metal or more rock than these dudes that have actually done it. You can think you are, you can say that to yourself, but factually, you're not.
Yeah, and it's been fun to see their music evolve throughout the years too. Joe and Nick going their separate ways. Kevin, I saw, my mom told me randomly one day he was doing like contracting after the band broke up. So it's like been cool to see just throughout the years, and then for them to come back together and still have the huge sold out crowds just shows, I mean, how awesome of people they are too. I mean, obviously you know them way more personally than the one time I met them in a meet and greet, almost blacking out from heat exhaustion.
I bet.
But they seem incredible. And same, like I was telling you with Dream Theater, like for them to play my uncle's song, like a little bit of his song in one
beautiful.
show.
Oh my goodness. That was
so my uncle is Ace Baker or Ace Bandage. So the song that they started to play, Bring On the Girls, was from Ace Bandage, the rock opera, which was a show. I think he might have done it at House of Blues in LA for a little while. It was when I was too young. I was not allowed to listen to the music or go to the shows. But my uncle said he was just doing a normal show with them. And all of a sudden they start just going into what sounds familiar to him. He's like, this isn't part of the show. And then he starts picking up. So they had actually learned his song without him knowing.
Wow.
And did it just during a show to surprise him. So it goes to show like how these people are so popular and so famous and so successful. And for them to take the time to learn their sound engineer, I'm probably screwing up his title. He's been around the industry for years. It's probably a better title than that. But
right.
For them to learn that, it's just, you want to support people like that.
Absolutely. And the Dream Theater guys, it's to me, it's surreal and out of this world to be able to say things like that. But when I started touring, when I got to LA with this guitar player by the name of Richie Kotzen, who I loved and admired. And you talk about getting starstruck, playing songs with him. That was even more intense than with Gary, because this guy is among the greatest guitar players that ever lived. It was like a different challenge. And then he used to play Mr. Big and Poison. So we were playing shows, and the guys from Poison were there. The guys from Mr. Big were there. And eventually, the experience with him kind of made me realize that there's this common denominator between people that are successful in what they do, right? And how much their music means to people. I started seeing this in every level. This was prior to the Jonas Brothers. But anyway, my point was, he played in Mr. Big and Poison or whatever, and then I quit his band. I had to leave his band to join the Jonas Brothers. And then he started, years later, a band called the Winery Dogs with his drummer named Mike Portnoy, who had left Dream Theater, and Mike Mangini, who was my teacher and played in Extreme, who I play with whose singer I used to play with back in the day. Then he joined Dream Theater. So obviously I'm not related, and it's not like 6 degrees of separation, whatever it's called. But I could trace somewhat of a thing where, like, so when I've met Portnoy, I'm like, oh yeah, dude, I used to play with Kotzen. Oh, cool. And then it's a different thing, not a different level, like I'm at his level. It's a different level of relationship. So it's if you meet Derek Jeter or a star player, you're like, oh, I know this, or I work with this, or I've done this, and it clicks. And so when people talk about like meeting your idols and stuff like that, if there's anything that I could recommend or suggest, it's like, if you want to make an impression, say something that not necessarily it's like I love you, and which is true, but maybe try to talk to them like a normal human being and mention something where, oh, that person gets. Like I met Keith Urban. I had done this show with a friend here in LA. It was like this all-star celebrity party thing, and Keith came and played. I'm calling him Keith as if I know the guy. But Keith Urban came and played a song. And he came to the show in Nashville, and I saw him like, hey, dude, I know this is random, but we did Sweet Home Alabama with so-and-so. And he's like, oh, my God, yeah, dude, how's he doing? And we had a friend in common. And he's like, oh, my God, tell him I say hi. Can you text him? So I texted him. I was like, hey, dude, Keith Urban wants to say, like, it's surreal that I've been able to do these kinds of things. So I appreciate it, and I love it. And my biggest sort of passion, aside from playing and making dreams come true, is obviously helping others live the things that I've lived and do the things that I have. And what fuels me is experiences with, like, the Jonas Brothers that are so amazing and whose music means to so many people, and how you see them appreciate their fans so much and be so generous to the people and fans and with their time and energy and stuff, that it just keeps me motivated. And that, to sort of answer the first question you asked me about COVID and stuff like that, is that continuing to work with people like that, continuing to do this, continuing to make a difference in people's lives, and be a small part of this big vision that could make somebody like you go to a show that you'll never forget in your life, or you might be going through some stuff that show for 2 hours, that pain doesn't exist, or that whatever was worrying you doesn't exist, and it might change your perspective, or it might motivate you to play percussion or whatever it is. So I think that's special, and I like to keep doing it, of course.
That's amazing. And yeah, those shows are the best. The ones where maybe you are having a really rough week or day, or maybe 5,000 things went wrong leading up to the show. And just for artists, and it's not every artist that can do it, but for artists to put on a show where you're just in your happy place for 2 hours or whatever it is, that's what's so special about music. And I think we try to do the same with sports. Obviously it's different because we have no control really of how a game is going to go, or anything like that. But it's just any little thing you can do to make someone's day, or just make them in such a better mood at the ballpark, stadium, whatever it may be. I think that's what's so special about our two industries, is just the impact you can have on people.
Absolutely. And also there's something to be said about, like, the expectations that you have. Sometimes you go to a game and you're like, well, you're feeling bad, and you're like, well, I know my team's going to lose, if you support like the Jets or something, you're like, oh my God, why? Then you just keep drowning in that sort of misery, because if you expect them to win and they don't, and then you take it out on them. But if you're like, you know what, I'm going to go, I'm so fortunate to be here. I'm at the park. I'm going to see the Jets play. And who are they playing against? Oh, they're playing the Patriots. Wow, I'm going to witness history right now. Greatness. That could be something that you hang on to. And then you learn from that. You learn to make the best out of bad situations, and how to mold, and how to adapt, and how to always look at, the silver lining, and see that, although we can't control necessarily how we feel, we can control how we react and what we do about it. And that's why I love so much sports, music, and life. They're sort of connected, and I'm lucky to love all two things that happen, that make my life really enjoyable, and aside from obviously my relationships and family and stuff.
Definitely. I have a side story about Gillette that I should have told you. So I'm actually a Patriots fan too. People always give me crap for it because they're like, you've never lived on the East Coast. How can you even be a Patriots fan? And I remember when I first started watching football, it was always the Patriots for whatever reason it was. Now, obviously, I support the Cardinals being the hometown team as well. But I went to a game at Gillette whenever I went to Boston, 2017, 18, whatever it was. And I only went to the game, or I had tickets to the game, because my friend was on the Ravens and it was Monday Night Football. And so I went, and of course I had to wear the Ravens gear because I was like, I have to support my friend. Like,
right, of course.
I flew out here for him, his game, whatever. The amount of people that gave me such a hard time and yelled at me. I was like, I'm a Pats fan. I swear, like, the Patriots ended up kicking the Ravens' butts. Like, it was so bad, but I was like, don't
which
yell at me.
doesn't
Like,
always happen, right?
I know, but it
Yeah,
was like, it was the weather, like everything was just coming together for the perfect storm for the Patriots. But it was just surreal, actually finally being in Gillette and then having to cheer
amazing.
for the
I've
other
been to
team.
Gillette a couple of times. I saw them many years ago, like 2005, I want to say, when they were almost. I think they did go the whole season unbeaten. I forget. It was against Detroit. It was like the
Mhm.
worst snowstorm ever. Almost got stranded out there.
Oh my
And
gosh.
then I saw them when they won the Super Bowl a couple of years ago. I saw them play the Packers, actually. So my wife got me tickets, and it was a Thursday night game, and we flew to
Mhm.
Foxborough, flew to Boston, went to Foxborough, and watched the Patriots beat the Pack. And it was pretty intense.
It's
Um,
so fun. The one thing I
yeah,
will hate on with Gillette though is driving there and
awful.
leaving
Oh, it's
is
the worst.
there's like one lane in, one
Yeah,
lane out.
it's the worst. I don't even understand how these people like put up with it. I would have. That's the kind of stuff that I boycott stuff for. I'm like, oh well, I'm not going. If you don't make this easy
Yeah.
for us, like, sorry, I'm like, I'll stay home and watch. You know.
And we parked in some random lot that wasn't even close to the stadium. And it was like $40 to park and walk
Yeah.
forever. And I'm like,
Oh my
what
god.
is this right now?
Oh my god. Have you
But
been to Lambeau? In Lambeau, you have it because it's
no.
in the city in like suburbs. There
Mhm.
are you can park in people's driveways. That's how they make money.
What?
They make hundreds of dollars a year, if not thousands, just by
Mhm.
letting people park in their driveway. So they
That's
move.
actually a really good idea.
Yeah, they like move their cars like inside their garage, and they park like two or three or in their front yards or whatever, and they
Mhm.
make bank every single Sunday.
They just like stand out there and take money
Yeah,
for it,
yeah,
basically.
we did it. We went to Lambeau. We watched them play the Bears, and we
Mhm.
went and we rented a car, and then we parked in some lady's house, and we just parked there, left
Huh.
our car there, and
Oh my gosh.
they do it so that you don't have to wait for somebody else's keys, or like if they block you in, you can just drive around them and leave. It just they have this system figured out, and it's
Dang.
pretty impressive. Yeah,
Jeez. That's so cool. I'm so bummed that there's no fans this year at
I know.
anything because I would do anything to like go to an NFL game at this point, just
Yeah,
for some sense of normalcy.
yeah, I agree. I miss it as well. Even though, excuse me, I don't necessarily miss the my people like my page. No, some of the worst people I know are Patriots fans. Some of the best people I know are Patriots. Even being in the stadium, like, and I'm sure we'll talk about this. Like, as a big feminist, and almost by definition, I don't love like the typical dude, like sports loud guy, and that's what Boston is. That's what
Mhm.
Gillette Stadium is. That's what Fenway Park is, and it's not something that I necessarily love. So I don't necessarily miss that. I miss the atmosphere, and
Mhm.
also I get a little nervous and anxious with huge crowds when I'm not in control of leaving and entering. Like if I'm
Mhm.
on stage, I know how to leave, and I know the exits and all that other stuff.
Yeah.
If you're there, you're kind of like, okay, if shit goes down, good luck, buddy. You know.
Yeah, I'm the same way. I actually have really bad anxiety coming from my PTSD over large crowds. So, like, I don't know if you've ever been to the Waste Management Open in
Oh
Scottsdale.
no, I've always wanted. I mean, I say always as in it would be cool, but like
Yeah.
every prototypical dude that I would not want to be around, Baba Booey is there, right?
Yeah. So, don't, if you ever go, don't do general admission because that is a nightmare. The tournament has a couple 100,000 people every year. And so, imagine all of that just trying to get around the golf course. But I did figure out because I worked at iHeart. So, we had
Awesome.
Skybox tickets for the 16th hole, which is like the
Right.
party one
Yeah. Right.
with the
Right.
golf tournament. Um, that was cool, but I always say I will never do general admission again because it's just body to body. People
No,
are
thank you.
drunk, like bumping up against you. But highly recommend, like, if you can ever get a hookup for a skybox, you
I
should do
I
it.
have a couple of people, coincidentally, that could hook me up to that. The one golf event that I could have any hookup to, and I love golf. I don't know if you see my golf clubs there.
Oh yeah,
I'm
I did notice them earlier.
I'm horrible, but damn, I love golf. I love it.
You should do it. And I figured out a little back way too, because the lines are insane. But I'm gonna ruin my secret on this
Don't
show.
say it.
But
Don't say it.
I'll
Keep
I'll
it.
text it to you
Okay,
after.
yeah, yeah.
Because it's
Don't
one of
say it.
those where like it's clutch, and I don't know if I want everyone to
Don't
hear
tell
it,
anybody. Don't tell
but
anybody.
it's a lifesaver. But one final thing, or I guess topic, and we don't have to go too deep into it because it is a pretty like deep subject that I don't know how open either of us really want to be right now about it. But one thing that I've always loved about you, and I make it, like you said in the beginning, I make it very known that I support you and what you stand for. So you are always somebody that is so vocal about domestic violence. And you are somebody where I've talked to other people that have been victims, and they always say, we're always looking for somebody that can just make a stand and make their voice heard, because there's a lot of people that maybe in side conversations will be like, okay, like I know what you're going through, I feel for you, whatever. But then when it comes to social media, they're right back and cheering for the athletes that are known for domestic violence or whatever it is. So for you, what made you just truly be an ally, and like why is it so special to you and so important to you?
I have no problem being completely open with you, by the way, and I thank you for your question and for the compliments about that. It's probably the best thing anybody could compliment me on is that I when I stand out or stand up and I mention things, a lot of people assume that like, did your dad hit your mom or something like that? And
Mm-hmm.
no, my dad couldn't have been more respectful to my mother.
Mm-hmm.
I've had beautiful relationships with my girlfriends in the past. I have a beautiful marriage. I have an amazing relationship with my sister, with my aunts, my grandmothers, my female friends. I look up to female athletes. I look
Mm-hmm.
up to female musicians, and that is why I'm an ally, because I love them and because I'm aware that they need allies, and I
Mm-hmm.
know in a cause doesn't have to affect me directly for it to move me in me
Mm-hmm.
wanting to help, and I can't help it, I can't help how I feel if I hear about domestic violence. It drives me off the wall, and it makes me very sad, and it makes me very angry. The same way with gun violence,
Mm-hmm.
and but there's something about domestic abuse that is the idea of exerting power over somebody else and bring them down emotionally, physically, mentally, that is the worst of human behavior.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe the more we talk about it, the more people might be inclined to change or to be aware of, or at least be able to help others. And I had a conversation the other day of a friend that somewhat criticized like me for like, dude, why don't you ever speak about like women that hit men?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, well, first of all, domestic abuse, when I speak about domestic abuse, it implies women hitting men as well.
Mm-hmm.
But the reality is also that the vast majority of domestic abusers are men.
Mm-hmm.
So I sort of choose that particular battle, and we went over. We had a deep conversation about that, and he brought some amazing points that I kind of wasn't seeing. But I think that it's a true tragedy, and it's a true pandemic, and it's a true alarming thing, and it's so very alarming that I can't believe that it's not a bigger deal.
Mm-hmm.
And it grinds my gears when Tariq Hill, just to name him, um, that is a known abuser or was known, and maybe I should pick somebody else, but that people just like put it to the side and keep
Mm-hmm.
loving him, or anybody else. Maradona, the soccer player that died, the greatest of all time, and also he beat women. He had sex with underage women, and I choose to not idolize him and put him on a
Mm-hmm.
pedestal. I do it. And I express that. I'm not saying
Mm-hmm.
that people shouldn't. I'm saying I don't do it because this is
Mm-hmm.
what I stand for. He doesn't stand for. I maybe shouldn't have been vocal about him in particular. And a friend of mine, the same friend of mine, mentioned, he's like, dude, like David Bowie used to have sex with like super young girls, and you don't say anything about it. And I'm like, well, you know what? You're absolutely right. I'm a hypocrite. So, but the reality is, when I found that out many years ago, or a few years ago, my David Bowie listening experience went from every single day to once every 6 months or something like that. So I don't even know if I'm answering your question right, but it's like I'm saddened by it. It hurts me, and the reality is that it means that by stats alone, it means two things. One, if the stat is 1 out of every 3 women that you know have been sexually abused or domestically abused, that means two things. One, that 1 out of every 3 of your friends' wives, you know, not not multiple wives, but you know what I mean. They have been abused or harassed or sexually or raped, basically. And it also means that among your friends, your group of guy friends, so you take 10 dudes from the Waste Management Open, 10 dudes from an Arsenal game, 10 dudes from, I don't know, the Jonas Touring Crew, whatever it is, 10 random dudes. A few of them, if not most of them, have physically, mentally, or even raped a woman. That is, and excuse my French, but that is fucked up. That is horrible. And it's horrific. I mean, that is just the reality of it. So the reason why some women don't speak about it, it's because they are scared. So they might need somebody to mention stats and mention some things, and that is what happens. And the guys that criticize it are the same guys that don't have the balls to like dance at a wedding because they're afraid of what people might think. It's like, dude, you're afraid of what people might think about that, and so how do you think a woman's going to feel by speaking out when she can say something and her ex-boyfriend knows where she lives? Like, you don't even understand that. You can't comprehend that. Or what I mentioned the other day, like that I know a lot of women that have different handles on their Instagram pages or their Twitter handles or whatever, because they don't want an ex to know where they are. They don't want to know anybody. They don't want dudes lurking and being all stalky about it, and then finding out, oh, your name is Courtney. Oh, where's she from? Where does she work? Oh, you know how dudes are. And of course, there are crazy women, and there are women that abuse, and all. I get it. I understand. What I feel is women need more help than men, and not from like a macho perspective, which seems counterproductive or whatever. It just means to me that because of the overwhelming amount of abuse, the scale needs to be tipped the other way completely for it to be even. Or somewhat even. Not like same level of abuse. Obviously, it's less abuse, or more awareness to that abuse. And I do wish, I don't feel I do enough, right? I don't feel that my rhetoric is enough. I feel like I need to be equipped with more tools to know what to say if one of my friends tells me that they've been abused, who to call. So I need to do more of that. I need to educate myself more. I need to have on speed dial shelters or things like that if at any point people come to me and tell me, to be honest, and also I haven't had that. I haven't had anybody tell me like, hey, Demian, so-and-so hit me, or I'm going through abuse or whatever. It's always been like later on, like, oh, I was in an abusive relationship, or this happened, or so-and-so molested me, or blah, blah, blah. And conversation or whatever. So I just wish I could do better, and I try, so thank you. And I'm always open to hear more about what I can do and how I should do things in a better, more effective way. But that's just kind of what it is. And at the end of the day, regardless of music, regardless of sports and all this other stuff, it's very it can be reduced to something very basic, which is happiness in life. And if you're being abused, you cannot be happy. And if one set of people are doing most of the abuse, that needs to be changed.
Yeah, I think it's always eye-opening for me because I've been very vocal about it since I told my story in early 2016. I've had no problem speaking up about it. I've been on the news a couple times. And the thing to realize for everyone listening too is like, I'm not representative of most victims. Most victims are not okay being this public about it for the reasons that you said, where maybe my ex goes on social media, finds my name, finds where I'm living now. Like, it could happen. But one thing I did tweet when Tyreek Hill had his huge game, and I know you saw, was I was like, it just blows my mind how people just suddenly forget if you have a record-breaking game or whatever, he's good on your fantasy team. But the comments where one was like almost talking down to me, like, so do you not hate women abusers? And it's like, how is me talking about Tyreek Hill saying, oh, it's horrible for men, but not for women? Like, it's absolutely not that. Like, I think if you have some sort of feelings towards domestic violence, it shouldn't matter the gender of the abuser. I mean, it's horrible either way. And you've seen what's happened with Amber Heard and Johnny Depp. Like, that's a horrible abuser in Amber Heard. And she's basically ruined Johnny Depp's life. And so it's just stuff like that. But I think having somebody like you now in my life is so important too. And I think if, something ever happens and we're in the same city at the same time, I have ideas on different shelters. We were supposed to do something really cool this season with the Aces. We do a Joe Torre domestic violence awareness game. It's like a league initiative. And we were going to take our GM, a coach, and our mascot to one of the shelters. And I would speak to them because I'm the only one with firsthand experience. And we were going to give them tickets to a game. So it's like little things like that where I think if you and I ever partner up, I think there's really cool things we can do. But I just wanted to bring it up on this show just because it's been months that I know that you've been so awesome and supportive.
Thank you. And I applaud you for doing that. And I would love to do that. And to the point about your tweet, like, the problem wasn't what you tweeted. The problem was that the person read that to reply and not to understand. He didn't, because I'm assuring you it's a guy that replied, right? He was like, whoa, but what about this? No, just read what Courtney said. Okay? And you also don't have to make a comment. He doesn't have to comment about it.
Yeah.
And it's like, you need to write this dissertation for him to be happy. No, it's a tweet, you idiot. It's 180 characters or 240. Leave her alone. Let her tweet. There are things that I don't agree with, and I don't need to go, over. And, it's also like there's this almost like what I see like almost like a fake feminism, or like patting in the head, of to helping women. Like I think it's Samantha Fuller, the kicker, right? Is that her name, Samantha Fuller?
Sam Fuller, yeah.
Sam Fuller, yeah.
Sarah Fuller.
So you cannot, if you truly want to help the cause, it's not enough by just having her on the field, right? You need to set her up for success. Don't make her do a squib kick or whatever it's called that anybody that has ever kicked the ball knows that she did it on purpose and she placed it and it was magnificent. But most people are going to be, oh, she didn't even kick it far. Oh, this is why she did. And it was horrible. And I'm like, the coach, I'm like, fuck you, dude. Like, what are you doing? She could have just kicked the game was like over. Like, come on. So those are the things that I think are also, even though they sort of disguise in feminism in a way, or helping the cause, which is not necessarily about domestic abuse, by the way. It's another thing. So there's always this layer of stuff that I've even been told like that I do this just to appeal to women. And I'm like, I've been married for like 8 years. Like, this is not even a thing. Like, so it's absurd to me how something that to me seems so logical and so commonsensical can be a point of contention and what's the word? It starts with P. Like polemic. Is that what the word in English?
I don't know.
Whatever. It's so anyway. Yeah, it's so thank you, and I would love to help out in any which way or form. It's something that I'm passionate about, and I'll make time for any of that stuff for sure.
I appreciate you. And just thank you so much for being just such a source of light and happiness. And
Thank you.
2020 has been tough for basically everyone.
Yeah.
So to have somebody like you with your mindset and always just being so positive, it's needed. So
Thank you.
That.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. I applaud you for doing this, and I feel flattered to be among your guests. And I thank you for all your always being so nice and such amazing comments and complimenting what I do. And of course, we always see eye to eye with the domestic abuse, and we're always sort of basically retweeting the same things or tweeting about the same things. So I appreciate that, and I hope that someday in the near future, we're not talking about that because not because we choose not to talk about it, but because it's less of an issue, or we talk about it less, exponentially less. So,
yeah, I couldn't agree more. All right, well, it looks like I took up an hour and 20 minutes of your time. This is going to be the longest episode ever. But tell people where they can follow you. I know you have a podcast.
I do.
Tell people where they can listen to that as well.
So I haven't done I took a little break of my podcast because I had done it for 244 Mondays in a row. So I needed a break. Yeah, I started it 4 years ago on Valentine's Day 4 years ago. And it's called the Music Mentor Podcast. And basically what I try to do is I try to motivate and inspire and challenge and empower the listeners through opinions, lessons I've learned, anecdotes, and of course, stories and things like that, with the aim of allowing those people to make their dreams come true in the music business or in the arts, or just be happy in the music ecosystem. So that is available in every platform, Apple Music, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, TuneIn, Deezer, and all these other things. And what I've been doing mostly, aside from Instagram and Twitter, all that stuff that you can follow me at Demian Arriaga, is through that name, through the same name I'm on Twitch. So I Twitch 5 days a week. So in the lack of performing opportunities, what I do is I have 5 different nights that I do different things on. So on Mondays, I do like a live music mentor show. It's kind of like Love Line, but for musicians, if anybody wants to tune in and ask questions about the business. On Tuesdays, I play congas for a while, like all salsa classics and stuff. Wednesdays, I play the handpan, which is like this sort of Zen meditative instrument that I do that for a couple of hours. And then Thursdays and Saturdays, I play drums, and I just kind of take requests and I play just random stuff. But that has given me an excuse to stay active and make music and interact with people, and that has been really cool. And if for anybody that wants to listen to my music, you can find my new EP. So going through what you were saying, or over what you were saying about like we're all going through a tough time, because that is true, I wanted to know how I could help this. So I did 2 meditative albums, basically. And they're like very chill with like nature sounds and Zen vibes and stuff.
I actually think while you're talking about it, I'm pretty sure I have it on my phone.
That is amazing, and I thank you for it. Well, that is okay. So that is my older one, even though I did release it this year, but I just released a new one. That is, so even though that one is somewhat mellow because of the type of instrument it is, this one is even way more, like you're gonna fall asleep. That's the whole point, for you to listen to this and be so bored and so like out, and you're like, oh my god. So you finally rest. Right, there it is. It's called the Afternoon Tea Sessions.
I'm downloading it right now.
Yeah, there are 2 albums. So thank you. So yeah, anybody that wants to support, and you can buy my music on Bandcamp, or you can just listen to it. If you don't have any money, you can listen to it for free on Spotify.
There you go. Well, I definitely need that because I cannot fall asleep very easily. So
please tell me, listen to it, and hopefully it'll make you either take a nap or doze off. But you have to tell me. You got to tell me, like, hey. And hopefully you'll only hear the first 2 songs of the album, because it means you passed out for the other ones. So
perfect. That will be my lifesaver. Then that'll be like my nightly thing.
That is the goal. That is the goal.
Good. Well, thank you so much, my friend, for joining
Absolutely.
the show. It's been such a blast. I look forward to hopefully seeing you on the road
I hope so as well.
someday
I hope so.
once COVID calms down.
I
But
know. I know. Hopefully, fingers crossed, and
yes,
just want everybody to be safe and just hang in there and remember that it's not about you or me, it's about others. So,
exactly. Well, have an amazing holiday season
thank
and
you.
we'll
You as
stay in
well. We'll
touch.
be in touch.